Zula, an MP from President Zelensky's party and ex-advisor to the Foreign Minister of Ukraine, Cormac Smith. Well, they're all going to go head-to-head on this in the clash at 9:20. Are we finally about to get answers on the scope of the COVID vaccine's devastating side effects, and why are the vast bulk of the media ignoring deaths and other tragedies that have prompted calls for a government inquiry? Well, the man forcing Parliament to confront the pandemic's most taboo subject, Sir Christopher Shope, will be here to discuss his vaccine damage bill at 10:20. Our woke university is completely out of control. Toby Young, founder and director of the Free Speech Union, weighs in on the cancellation of Christians and discrimination claims against Britain's race czar on the country's most PC campuses. He's uncancelled at 10:40. As the Met investigation into the disappearance of Madeleine McCann looks set to close after 11 years and £13 million in costs, were authorities justified in dedicating so much time and money to a single missing persons case? It's a tricky subject, but we'll tackle it without fear at 10 p.m. Should our schools teach the benefits of colonialism? Equalities Minister Kemi Badenoch thinks so.
History isn't about trying to enforce a particular narrative or view. It's about telling the truth about things that happened.
I'll be getting the view of GBNews star Neil Oliver in The Outsider at 9:30. Why are the government and the NHS reluctant to accept Carol Sikora's incredible offer to give tens of thousands of cancer patients fast-track treatment to combat the backlog? Well, the positive professor opens up about the indecision that's wasting valuable time and what more can be done to help the 6 million plus waiting for vital care. That's at 9:45. Is this debacle involving trans swimmer Leah Thomas risking the end of women's sport as we know it? Plus, Prince William shows off his, quote, beautiful rhythm in Belize. But can the Cambridges shake off controversy over the trip? All that and more, including your first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages and the media buzz at 10 and 10:30. And as ever, I'll crown another Greatest Briton in Uni and Jackass before the night is out. This is Dan Wootton tonight. Let's go. Just one thing first, though. As you know, I've been able to look past much of the corruption in Ukraine to back President Volodymyr Zelensky's war effort against the despotic Putin regime, which has unified most of the world. But I am disappointed in his decision to ban 11 opposition parties and all private TV stations. I understand that in war, extraordinary measures sometimes need to be taken. But in this case, the world is backing Ukraine and Zelensky because they want to embrace democracy, not morph into another tin pot dictatorship. Zelensky should realise that with the weight of support, some local opposition, even from parties with Russian sympathies, does not provide any significant threat. But the creep back towards authoritarianism certainly does. I'll get the verdict of my superstar panel shortly. Tonight, the Daily Express columnist Carol Malone is here. So too, senior reporter at the newspaper Benjamin Butterworth and the social commentator Esther Kraku. By keeping us updated with the news headlines all night is Tamsin Roberts.
Dan, thank you. Good evening from the GB newsroom. The President of Ukraine says any compromises with Russia will need to be put to a referendum. Earlier, President Zelensky said Ukraine could never surrender Kyiv, Mariupol or Kharkiv to Moscow. Ukrainian troops have refused to surrender in the port city of Mariupol, which is surrounded by Russian forces. President Zelensky explained what life is like for civilians now living in Ukraine.
We hear it for hours, days, weeks. Our people hear it all the time, and immediately they take children, help the elderly, go to shelters, to basements, to save themselves, to survive from Russian missiles and bombs. With the sound of this siren, Ukrainians live, work, try to sleep, get treatment for wounds, give birth to children, die.
Meanwhile, Boris Johnson has underlined his horror at President Putin's use of increasingly brutal tactics, including siege warfare and the targeting of civilians. During a meeting with the leaders of the US, France, Germany and Italy, he welcomed the unity of allies, saying collective action has been effective in undermining Putin's war machine. The leaders agreed to increase the pressure on Russia by maintaining wide-ranging sanctions. MPs have backed a Labour motion condemning P&O Ferries' decision to sack 800 staff without notice and demanding their immediate reinstatement. The vote follows protests in London against the sudden sackings. The non-binding motion passed by 211 votes to 0. It called on the government to suspend the contracts and licences of DP World, the owner of P&O Ferries, and urgently bring forward legislation to outlaw fire and rehire. The Prime Minister has not yet been interviewed as part of an investigation into lockdown-busting parties, Downing Street says. Detectives investigating gatherings held in Downing Street and the Cabinet Office have begun speaking to witnesses. It comes after over 100 people filled out a questionnaire under caution, including Boris Johnson. As yet, no referrals have been made for the issuing of fixed penalty notices. A court has heard that a man on trial for the murder of MP Sir David Amess had planned potential attacks on other politicians, including Cabinet Minister Michael Gove. The Conservative MP for Southend West was meeting with constituents in a church building in Leigh-on-Sea in Essex last October when he was fatally stabbed. Ali Harbi Ali has appeared at the Old Bailey and denies murder and preparing terrorist acts. Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe says she should have been freed 6 years ago. Speaking publicly for the first time since being released, the British Iranian questioned why it took 5 secretaries of state for her to be freed. Nazanin landed back in Britain last Thursday after the UK finally agreed to settle a £400 million debt dating back to the 1970s. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Dan Wootton tonight.
The hypocrisy of the liberal media elite. If there's one aspect of public life I have been determined to expose since the launch of GB News last summer, I hope regular viewers and listeners will agree it's that. And it's been a long time since I've seen the sort of rank hypocrisy from the Ramona establishment displayed all weekend long after Boris Johnson dared to say this at the Tory party spring conference on Saturday.
There are some around the world, even in some Western governments, who invoke what they call realpolitik and who say that we're better off making accommodations with tyranny. I have to say I believe they are profoundly wrong, and that to try to re-normalise relations with Putin after this, as we did in 2014, would be to make exactly the same mistake again. And I know that it's the instinct of the people of this country, like the people of Ukraine, to choose freedom every time. I can give you a couple of famous recent examples. When the British people voted for Brexit in such large numbers, I don't believe it was because they were remotely hostile to foreigners. It's because they wanted to be free, to do things differently, and for this country to be able to run itself.
Outrageous! Howled Ramonas everywhere. How on earth could he drag the concept of Brexit into a war? How disgusting, they screeched as the Observer and the Sunday Times splashed the story all over its front pages. But here's the problem. It's been these very same outraged Ramonas who have been dragging Brexit into the conflict since the war broke out. The former Tory Cabinet Minister and ex-Deputy Prime Minister Lord Michael Heseltine told The Observer following the Prime Minister's remarks, Boris Johnson cannot escape his responsibility for the disasters of Brexit by a cynical exploitation of the incredible bravery of the Ukrainian people. Millions of Conservatives will be ashamed at so flagrant an attempt to exploit the horrors we see every day for party advantage. But in an open letter to Jacob Rees-Mogg in The Guardian on the 3rd of March, the very same Heseltine used the conflict to emphasise the supposed tragedy of leaving the EU, writing, "Nothing so reveals the reality of Brexit as the meeting of European leaders in Brussels in the aftermath of Vladimir Putin's assault on Ukraine. Our continent faces a threat as severe as anything since the end of the Cold War. I am ashamed that the country that in my lifetime saved European democracy has now absented itself as others determine Europe's response." What about bitter Ramona, Alistair Campbell, who tweeted on Sunday, "The problem is Johnson debases not just himself, but all who fail to condemn and seek to justify." Surely that can't be the same Alistair Campbell who wrote on March the 6th, "See the passion in Putin's opposition to a final deal referendum on Brexit. Why? Anyone would think he had skin in the game. Johnson was a useful idiot." There's also former Financial Times editor Lionel Barber, who tweeted yesterday, "My verdict, cheap, historically absurd and pandering to a few Tories in a hall." But just 10 days ago, Barber had tweeted this photo with the caption, I'll show it to you in a moment, there it is, "One incontestable fact, Putin's war has reinvigorated the EU." And what about the most vindictive and deranged Ramona of them all, LBC's James O'Brien? Well, on Saturday afternoon, he got himself whipped into a frenzy, writing, "It's been clear forever that Johnson possesses not a single shred of decency, but I am still sometimes shocked at the depth of his depravity. This insults all but the most meat-headed Brexit voter in Britain and almost everyone in Ukraine, where the desire to join the EU is clear." That's funny, as less than a week earlier, Mr. O'Brien had decided to directly link the war to Brexit with this tweet. "Imagine having to explain to your children why you chose Farage, Dorries, Johnson and Rees-Mogg over being an integral part of this." So whatever you think of Boris Johnson's comments, which he's now privately conceded were unwise, do not let the revolting Ramona hypocrites claim faux horror for linking Brexit to the war. They've been doing it non-stop since Putin sent in his first tank to Ukraine. And I've got the receipts. To respond now, my superstar panel. The Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, senior reporter at the newspaper Benjamin Butterworth, and the social commentator Esther Krakow. Malone, what a load of hypocrites these Ramonas are,
I'm glad
right?
you mentioned James O'Brien, because he manages to bring Brexit into whatever his argument is. It just happens to be this week it's the war. I listen to him some days and I think, oh my God, I don't know how you wound it in there. But he does. I think this was just confected outrage from Boris's enemies. OK, I will concede that using the B word was probably not wise. But if people actually stopped to listen to his speech, it was actually a very good speech. If you listen to what he said before, and he brought the Brexit, what he actually said was that Ukrainians and Britain had a shared instinct for freedom, and that the Brexit vote had expressed this country's desire for freedom. OK, so... But I think it probably wasn't wise to use Brexit in that case. But it is not what they were. They were actually saying he compared Brexit with the Ukrainian struggles with Putin. He did not do that. Listen to the speech. Look at the transcript. I have the transcript right here. But, I just think this is an excuse for his enemies to jump on about everyone who attacked Boris over the speech has attacked him over a million other things since he was elected, whenever that was. And it's just, the idea that he would compare the flack that Leavers had over Brexit with what is happening in Ukraine is absurd. It's totally absurd.
Esther, I wouldn't mind, though, if they made that criticism if they hadn't linked Brexit to the war.
Yes.
But they've all done it.
Yeah.
And, you can see how far Brexit still runs deep for them. Right, even
they'll never get
after
over
the vote, that you can still see how deeply they hold on to it. I think my issue is with this: why did they not have the same reaction when Zelensky's addressed the Knesset in Israel when he compared Ukraine's current struggles to the Holocaust? Right, you have to be very careful with these things. because it's not exactly the same thing. Many Russians have actually ethnically Ukrainian family members. It's not exactly, the politics are very different, but you can see they will kick up a storm over something like this, which I also must admit, that wasn't the perfect comparison. I think what he was trying to say was more of Ukrainians' desire for self-determination.
For freedom.
Exactly. For self-determination and self-actualization.
And democracy, fundamentally.
Yes.
But Benjamin Butterworth, how on earth can you defend this rank hypocrisy from Alistair Campbell, from Michael Heseltine, from James O'Brien, from Lionel Barber? Your heroes, by the way.
I mean, I can't say I can afford to buy the Financial Times, but, you know, I mean, the nonsense of what you're saying, what this really reveals...
It's not nonsense,
yet
it's
again,
fact.
is that Boris Johnson is a careless man. He uses words without thinking. It's one of the reasons Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe spent 6 years in prison. He doesn't have the dignity or the respect for his office, and he shows it over and over again to try and suggest that there are any similarities between the actions of Russia and Ukraine and Brexit. It shows a lack of statesmanship.
Okay, that's your opinion on Boris's speech.
People that are opposed to Brexit somehow don't value freedom.
That's your opinion on Boris's speech, and I'm very happy for Benjamin to have that opinion.
Can I just say...
Very generous of you.
Could you explain, then, why Boris is the most popular politician in Ukraine
at the moment,
apart from Zelensky? Latest poll.
But that's,
just in the past couple of days.
That's an unrelated question to the one we're discussing.
No, it isn't really.
It is.
Do you think he's going to be the most unpopular one tomorrow? Because I don't think he is.
Because if you asked me, is Britain making the right decisions and being tough on Ukraine, I'd say yes. But that is quite separate to him insulting 48% of the British people.
No, he did. Oh, how did he insult?
By trying to suggest that there are links between the people that supported Brexit valuing freedom in a way that apparently I don't. That is a farcical nonsense.
What he was saying was that we had a shared instinct for freedom.
And the truth is,
no, but I think
the truth is
that behind the vote. So the fact that the vote even happened is a symbolism for freedom. If we had voted to remain in the EU, that would still hold valid because it's the fact that we did have that vote. If you're in a country like Afghanistan, Iran, well, Russia, this vote wouldn't have even happened.
Exactly.
The truth is that so many of the Brexiteers, and this is what the supposed hypocrites you highlighted were reporting.
That's what I want you to get to, the hypocrites.
Yeah, well, they're not hypocrites because why don't...
They're not hypocrites.
Why don't, instead of asking me, when you have it Tuesdays or Wednesdays, Nigel Farage is on your programme, why don't you ask him
He'll be on Wednesday
about the Russian money that he took for so many years,
he's
about the Russian
already addressed
funding of the Brexit supporters that was so prolific, about the huge sums of money over many years that he took from Russia today. Why didn't you ask him that? Because that's
I'd be very careful about what you say there, because he has made it very clear to Christopher Bryant that if Christopher Bryant makes those claims outside of Parliament, he will sue. So it'd be very ironic if he were to sue you for something you said on his very own channel.
That claim was about 2018, not about doing Russia Today generally. I know what he got paid for Russia Today. You know, it's proper money.
What about when Alistair Campbell said Putin interfered in the referendum because he knew that the EU without the UK would weaken them both? What about when he said
Just lies, isn't it, Benjamin?
We know for a fact that Russia
and just a lie, isn't it,
the funding of Brexit supporters...
Benjamin, that's just a lie from Alistair Campbell, isn't it?
What are you saying is a lie?
Well, so you're not even listening. What he said was, he said Putin interfered in the referendum.
He's buying time,
because he knew that the EU without the UK would weaken them both.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. There's no doubt about that.
Oh, yeah, we're so
Where's the evidence for that, Benjamin?
We're really weak now, aren't we, in this Ukrainian situation?
Because he knows that his enemies...
Germany is the country who's actually made sure, because of their inability, their incompetence in supplying their own gas, they've actually made the whole of Europe dependent on Russia's gas now.
Russia is stronger when its enemies, countries like the UK, the US and the EU, he knows that Benjamin is stronger when we are weak.
Benjamin, I would have respect for your position, much more respect for your position, if you were prepared to say tonight Boris Johnson was wrong for linking the war to Brexit, but so too were Michael Heseltine, Alistair Campbell, James O'Brien and Lionel Barber. But what disgusts me about Ramonas like you is you are hypocrites. You will not do it. Why condemn Boris and not condemn your mates for doing the same thing?
I mean, look, the tweet you used from James O'Brien didn't compare them. It simply pointed out that we'd isolated ourselves from all of our nearest allies on this topic.
You know the point he was making.
That's also given us the flexibility to be the most useful partner for Ukraine in this conflict. You do realise that? everything the EU is doing has to be
We're
coordinated.
talking about the EU, the greater EU, how, you know, what did Barbara
I've done
say?
terribly over
That
this crisis.
It had reunited them. Germany wasn't even going to send weapons until a fortnight ago. Couldn't be bothered.
But it showed
Very good point. And by the way, there's a whole load that you can go into showing how ineffectively the EU has actually dealt with this crisis.
Completely.
Well, I don't accept it, and also it was the pressure of other EU countries that turned Germany's attitude around to end decades of a set view of how to behave on these things, and they changed it after people like Emmanuel Macron changed their mind.
So Benjamin,
of the
just to
German
clarify,
Chancellor.
you expect to hold the Prime Minister to a different standard than your Ramona pals? Just to clarify.
I expect that you shouldn't look at Boris Johnson comparing Brexit to Russia and Ukraine, and that you should be able to criticise that without any caveat. But it appears you can't. You are so high on the Kool-Aid of Brexit that you have to bring it back to this old divide. It's just a nonsense.
But they made the divide.
That's what I've done. That's what I've done.
He did recognise that comparing Brexit to Ukraine wasn't necessarily the best comparison.
Yeah. I'm just saying we should have the same rule.
Exactly.
We should have the same rule across society. If we're saying it's wrong to blame Brexit for this war, it shouldn't matter whether it's Boris Johnson making the comparison or whether it's James O'Brien making the comparison. Benjamin Butterworth, Carol Malone, Esther Krakow, my superstar panel are here all night. But coming up, should our schools show more pride and teach the benefits of the British Empire? Equalities Minister Kemi Badenoch thinks so, and I'll get the no-nonsense view of GB News star Neil Oliver in The Outsider at 9:30. But up next, as Zelensky refuses Russia's ultimatum to hand over the besieged city of Mariupol, should the Ukrainian president compromise on some of Putin's demands regarding neutrality? Crimea and separatist regions. Former soldier Phil Campion, who's just returned from Ukraine, Mariana Zula, an MP from Zelensky's party, and ex-advisor to the Foreign Minister of Ukraine, Cormac Smith, will all go head-to-head in the clash after the break. I want to know what you think on this sort of controversial one. Dan at gbnews.uk. Tweet me at gbnews. We've got a poll running too. It was very close the last time I looked. So a bit like Brexit, your vote will matter. Get in now. Back soon.
Hello and welcome to the latest. I'm Aidan McGivern. Variable amounts of cloud will drift across the UK during the next 24 hours, giving the odd shower, but for most it's staying dry and fine. We're on the edge of an area of high pressure which is dominating things to the east of the UK, keeping weather systems at bay from the Atlantic. A southerly airflow will mean that areas of generally medium or high cloud will drift north from the continent, and they could bring the odd shower to southern England, South Wales during Monday night and into the start of Tuesday. But for the vast majority, it's simply a dry night, clear spells, and where we get prolonged clear spells in sheltered spots, there'll be a touch of frost as we start off Tuesday. The lowest temperature, perhaps the northwest of Scotland, -3 Celsius possible here. However, despite the cold start in places, it's looking like a sunny morning on Tuesday, and any medium cloud that drifts north, bringing with it some showers, will tend to fade away by the afternoon. Just the odd shower there for southern Scotland and northern England. Otherwise, under the sunshine, 15 to 18 Celsius widely up and down the country, 19 or 20 degrees possible in London or Cambridge. Cloud cover generally fizzles out on Tuesday night into the start of Wednesday, and with widespread clear skies, Wednesday morning starts off again with a chill in the air, a touch of frost in places away from urban centres, but a bright start. There'll be the odd fog patch for parts of eastern Scotland into northeast England, but for the vast majority, Wednesday morning is simply looking sunny, and that's how it stays throughout the day. A shower or two could bubble up across East Anglia and the southeast as temperatures rise to 17 or 18 Celsius. But for the vast majority, Wednesday's looking sunny, so is Thursday, so is Friday, but with a bit more cloud in the far northwest.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. Coming up, GB News star Neil Oliver and positive Professor Carol Sikora. But first, it's time for The Clash. And breaking tonight, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has said any compromises with Russia will need to be put to a referendum in Ukraine. It comes as Russian attacks continue, with reports that at least 8 people have been killed after a shopping centre and a number of houses were shelled in the Ukrainian capital of Kiev. Elsewhere, in the besieged city of Mariupol, local officials say at least 2,300 residents have now been killed, and about 90% of residential buildings are either damaged or totally destroyed. As the atrocities rack up, President Zelensky says negotiations with Russia are the only way to avoid a third world war, but some compromises simply can't be made. He has ruled out Russian demands that Crimea be recognised as part of its territory and that the breakaway regions of Donetsk and Luhansk be acknowledged as independent republics, along with the guarantee that Ukraine will never become a NATO member. Meanwhile, Moscow has accused Kiev of stalling peace talks by making proposals unacceptable for Russia. So, with both sides at a stalemate, should Zelensky compromise if it means getting a ceasefire? Send in your thoughts to dan@gbnews.uk. Tweet them to me @gbnews. And while you're there, vote in our very close Twitter poll. But weighing in on this is the former advisor to the Foreign Minister of Ukraine, Cormac Smith, Ukrainian MP and deputy head of the Parliamentary Committee on National Security, Defence and Intelligence, Mariana Bezula, and former SAS trooper Phil Campion, who has recently returned from Ukraine. So, Mariana, let me start with you. In Ukraine, you're a member of Zelensky's party. Is it not wise for him to compromise just a little bit in order to stop this terrible destruction?
You see, there is no way to compromise which is about the Ukrainian sovereignty and territorial aspects. We cannot be in compromise with it. And it's a principle. So it's clear. And of course, the end of war, it's about compromise. But everything which will be or can be compromised additionally, and which is very questionable for our nation, of course, it's a part of discussion in our referendum. And the president said it. But maybe it's obvious, but I need to emphasize where I'm sitting. I'm sitting in the capital, and the light is dark because I cannot switch it on because we have shelling.
I know.
So, and in those circumstances, in about months, yes, you showed shown it was previous night. And this night, I hope will be calm, but I doubt. Previous night, even in the capital, were destroyed 6 houses. Very modern and just regular for British people also. Shopping center was damaged to schoolhouses, and we have it such nightmare every day. So
no, Mariana, I know.
Having
and
this month, I'm sorry, I will finish. Having this month,
yes,
with all the deaths and damage, Ukrainian nation is not about to compromise about principal things. So, and the president as a leader is also about this. What about our sovereignty? It's a principle.
No, I get that. You've made that point very clearly. And as I have been saying for these past 3 weeks, the bravery of the Ukrainian people has blown me away. And Cormac Smith, I guess the point that I would make on this is that Ukraine has already won in a lot of ways. If you look at what Putin is now potentially prepared to accept, if you'd told him 4 weeks ago this is what he would get from the war, he would have said absolutely not. But it's worth a little bit of compromise, is it not, in order to stop this terrible shelling that Mariana refers to?
No, I don't think Ukraine has not won yet. Yeah. Ukraine has certainly had a number of very impressive victories and recently pushing Russian forces back north of Kyiv. But, you know, I can't really add an awful lot to what Mariana has just said. And before, in preparation for this call, I had a conversation with 3 very senior Ukrainian diplomats. Just to check, I actually find that it's amazing that we're actually having a discussion about what concessions Ukraine should make. Vladimir Putin is the Hitler of the 21st century. When I was in Ukraine serving the Ministry of Foreign Affairs between 2016 and 2018, many Ukrainian friends told me that Putin wants Ukraine without Ukrainians. And I didn't quite believe it at the time. The whole world is saying, and I've been saying for 6 years, that the world needs to see Putin and Russia, because it's not just Putin, Russia through Ukrainian eyes. Too late, we're waking up and starting to see the world through Ukrainian eyes. So we're here discussing what concessions Ukraine should make. What concessions are Russia going to make to stop being made a pariah state on the face of the earth for the next 50 or 100 years? How do we go about denazifying Russia? These are the questions we have to be asked. The country that invaded an innocent, peaceful, democratic country. Remember, and the viewers need to remember, for all of the smoke screens of NATO membership and denazification and everything else, these were all lies from the country that lies on an industrial scale. Putin hates Ukraine and Ukrainians with a passion because they have had the audacity to turn their back on Russia democratically. And every time a corrupt president tried to bring them back towards Russia, they rose up first in the Orange Revolution and then in the Maidan Revolution to take the country on the westward path. Putin hates this. He hates the Ukrainian people for doing it, and he fears it more than anything else because there is no greater threat.
No, very powerful words, and I understand that point.
So I think we need to ask, Dan, sorry, I'll just finish.
Yes.
I think we need to ask, what concessions are Russia going to make?
Yeah.
Because I can add nothing
I
to
get that, but I would argue, Phil Campion, they have already made a hell of a load of concessions because this is not where Putin was expecting to end the war. But look, you're just back, Phil, from Ukraine. Tell me what you experienced over there and what your take on this is.
Right, first of all, I'm going to point out in all of this, I'm not a politician, okay? So my views are very much...
That's why we like you, Phil.
Okay. I've been to Ukraine on a humanitarian gig, you know what I mean? And personally, I would give any assistance I could, and that comes without saying, but from a soldier's point of view. I absolutely have been so impressed with the Ukrainian people, the way that I've seen farmers digging trenches, the way I've seen normal people stacked up, waiting to go up against a Russian force, which quite, from my point of view, are being completely out of order, all right? And Putin is pulling off some absolutely disgusting, honking, horrible tactics to try and get these people to the table. The trouble is, from my point of view, that is only going to get worse. And so, as much as I don't ever want to even intimate that the Ukrainian people should compromise, I do still try and think that a solution should be found across the table to stop the normal, brave people who actually, you know, have had no part or say in any of this from suffering anymore. And it's really difficult because I can see the fight and the determination in the Ukraine people's eyes, and I've got nothing but respect for them. But I just wish there was some diplomatic solution to this which would, you know, alleviate. And sometimes you think, well, making a small concession somewhere might not be losing, you might have to lose a battle to win the war, is where I'm coming from. Do you know what I mean? You might, there might be some way tactically around saying, you know, we can rob Peter to pay Paul. Putin wants a way out of this. Putin needs to try and walk away from here with some sort of...
Yeah, he's losing. Okay, well, look, let me get Mariana to respond to that, Phil, if that's okay. Mariana, how would you respond?
What do you mean? I said about that the principle is our sovereignty. I also said that, of course, the end of war is always compromise, but the compromise should not be against the principles that are main for our nation. So it can be some guarantees of security. It can be even discussions about political positioning, but very careful and according to all that course, all that choice that Ukraine had before, and we paid this for our choice and this freedom of choice. As I emphasized previously, having almost months of the war, having so many deaths and so many destructions, at least I can even make some examples. Speaking about the date of 20th of March, we had 1,660 buildings destroyed, and among about 490 schools and kindergartens.
Oh, it's barbaric. It makes me sick.
170 different medical buildings, 170, 15,000 of kilometers of roads, and 350 different bridges. 15 airports.
And Mariana, it is those statistics that make me so passionate about trying to stop the shelling as quickly as possible, because, of course, I want a Ukraine for you to all come back to. But look, Cormac, I'm going to give you the final word. What are you hearing about the state of the negotiations? Zelensky offering to meet Putin face to face. It does feel like both men do want a deal, but what are you hearing, Cormac?
No. And I think Marianne will agree with me. And, you know, and the first thing I'd like to say, with the absolute utmost of respect to Phil, for what you've done, sir, and particularly for what you're doing in the humanitarian thing. And I want to make that very clear. But the one thing that I learned in my time in Ukraine was a lesson actually that, you know, diplomats and politicians have dealt with Russia over the decades have learned. You cannot trust Russia. There is no diplomatic solution with Russia. Russia understands only power and strength. So therefore, I mean, my observation, and this is from the outside, because yes, I may have friends in Kyiv, but I'm not a member of the largest party in the Rada, so I defer to Mariana. However, the one thing that I know is Zelensky is is keeping the moral high ground. He is making every effort to engage with Putin reasonably, right? And he has made it very, very clear. It was interesting. I listened to Ivana Klimpush, former vice prime minister, the other night, saying, you know, that Mr. Zelensky cannot make a decision that the Ukrainian people will not support. And indeed, Mr. Zelensky has said that any agreement must go to a
referendum. No, and I understand that, and I think that's a good compromise.
You cannot
yes.
trust the Russians.
No, and I hear that loud and clear.
Very, very little faith of any negotiations getting a reasonable.
Okay, well, thank you to you all. Fascinating points of view. That was former advisor to the Foreign Minister of Ukraine, Cormac Smith, the Ukrainian MP, deputy head of the Parliamentary Committee on National Security, Defence and Intelligence, Mariana Bizula, joining us, of course, from Ukraine, and the former SAS trooper Phil Campion, who's just returned from Ukraine. So who do you agree with? This is an interesting one. Raymond on Twitter says, if Zelensky doesn't compromise, then Putin will simply destroy Ukraine. From Sean, yes, he should compromise. Perhaps we should give peace a chance for a change. But Bet, via email, says, why should the president of Ukraine give up any territories to appease Russia's illegal invasion? Imagine an enemy invading Britain and taking Kent. Do we say you can have it if you leave the rest? What nonsense. And your verdict is now in, and it's a fascinating one. You're completely split on this, as I expected. 49% of you agree that Zelensky should look for a compromise with Putin, while 51% of you say absolutely not. And we'll, of course, keep on this story all week. But coming up, with 6.1 million patients awaiting vital care, is the NHS backlog so out of control that it will never be fixed? Positive Professor Karol Sikora is so horrified that he's planning to throw open the doors of his private surgeries to 30,000 cancer patients, and he'll discuss his amazing act of charity and how on earth we got to this stage at 9:45. But next, should we keep politics out of the classroom and teach the benefits of colonialism alongside the negatives? Well, Equalities Minister Kemi Bay did not think so, and GB News star Neil Oliver will give his verdict straight after the break.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows. Every day, we ask the questions that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. Toby Young and Karol Sikora on the way, but Neil Oliver is tonight's outsider. Fears of dangerous political organisations infiltrating school curriculums previously galvanised the government into ensuring the likes of Black Lives Matter are barred from the classroom. Now a fresh drive to teach children both sides of the story on matters such as colonialism aims to stop ethnic minority students seeing themselves as victims. Equalities Minister Kemi Badenoch, who's always been a reasoned voice in debates about race and culture, has championed the benefit of learning about the British Empire in a balanced way, as she did during parts of her childhood in Nigeria. That included learning about good things missionaries did for the country as well as the terrible things. Kemi believes the same approach should now be taken in British schools so that history remains about facts rather than the enforcement of a contemporary bias.
History isn't about trying to enforce a particular narrative or view. It's about telling the truth about things that happened. There were terrible things that happened during the British Empire. There were other good things that happened, and we need to tell both sides of the story. In Nigeria, it was actually a very nuanced description that here are the good things that happened, here were these missionaries, these are the things they did, and here are some of the terrible things that happened. There wasn't any sort of attempt to describe British Empire as, look at this really awful, terrible thing that oppressed and victimized us.
Neil Oliver, what do you make of this one?
Well, I think what Kemi Badenoch is saying is absolutely right. History is nuanced. It's shades of grey. You know what's happening in Ukraine, in the war there between Ukraine and Russia is shades of grey. And you know, I don't see any point in reporting black or white in that contemporary story. And likewise with history, I think the only thing we can do is seek to report all sides. I don't think there's any doubting, as Kemi Badenoch says, there's good and bad in the story of the British Empire, and I definitely don't think it's in anyone's benefit. I don't think it's to anyone's benefit to portray the British Empire as just a 100% negative story, even more pernicious. You know, it's that idea of apportioning the blame for things that happened in the past onto people alive in the present. We've known for since the beginning of time that application of blame in that way is wrong. You know, the Bible, Deuteronomy says, that fathers shall not be put to death for the sins of the children. Children shall not be put to death for the sins of the fathers. That is the point. And that we here in the present, I've always thought that we're not entitled either to take pride in what was done by the people in the past, nor is it our responsibility to be ashamed on our own behalf of what was done in the past. We are alive in the present. The only thing we can do is to seek as best we can to understand what happened in the past. And that is always shades of grey. And I think Kemi Badenoch is quite right. There were very bad things that happened in the past in the realm of the British Empire, but there were also very good things that happened. There were positives and negatives, and it's absolutely appropriate that both sides of the story be told. And she's absolutely right that to raise a part of the population as victims and to feel that they are only the victims of the past, I don't think is serving the people alive in the present.
Because, Neil, you have to admit, post-BLM and with this woke wave taking over our universities and our entire education system, the word colonialism, it's become a dirty word, really. None of these woke folk associate anything positive with it.
No, and that's obviously you can't. That is obviously wrong. You know, to paint it as being just only a uniformly black picture, just a negative picture, just that all that was done was bad, was deliberately bad, that the British Empire was always and only malign, is simply an inaccurate picture. And I think it's also conspicuous the way in which the only empire that's being portrayed in this way is the British Empire. The British Empire is just one of many. There have been empires bestriding parts of the planet, for 5,000 years and more, and each one of them is a story to be told of good and bad, and the way in which the British Empire is only portrayed in negative terms, seems completely inappropriate to me. There was the Ottoman Empire, there was the Austro-Hungarian Empire, there was the Roman Empire. There have been empires, since the beginning of civilization, and for some reason, it's the British Empire and the British Empire alone that is being denigrated and run down as having been the only empire that had sins and black marks against its name, and there's some kind of prejudice there as well.
No, there really is. There really is. Neil Oliver, fascinating as ever. Thank you so much for being here this week. We'll speak next week.
Thank you, Dan.
Neil Oliver, host of Neil Oliver Live on GB News 7 o'clock Saturday night. Now, coming up, as the Madeleine McCann case is set to close after 11 years and £13 million in costs, were authorities justified in spending so much time and money on a single missing person? Well, my superstar panel will debate that, and you'll get a first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages and the media buzz at 10. But next, why is the government and the NHS reluctant to accept Carol Sikora's incredible offer to give tens of thousands of cancer patients fast-track treatment to combat the NHS backlog? The Positive Professor opens up about the indecision that's wasting valuable time and what more can be done to help the 6 million plus waiting for vital care. That's coming up straight after the break.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube. You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. Time for Carol Sikora. We've always known he's got one of the kindest hearts in medicine, and now our very own Positive Professor has proven it by offering private cancer treatment to desperate patients caught up in the NHS backlog. Rutherford Health, which was co-founded by Carol in 2015, pitched the use of its revolutionary cancer centres back in December to help treat around 30,000 people over 3 years. Despite this incredible not-for-profit offer, Number 10, the Department of Health and NHS England have so far refused to enter into any deal despite up to 740,000 people missing urgent referrals for suspected cancer as of September. Those folk are just a handful of the 6 million plus currently awaiting routine care amid what a Common Select Committee characterised as years of decline, overseen by the Department of Health. 9 in 10 GPs now fear for their patients' safety as they try to rush their way through the backlog. So, Carol, it's clear the health service is in desperate need for help from the private sector. So why has the government not accepted your offer, your brilliant offer, by the way, and well done for making it, to treat people?
Difficult to know. We love the NHS, our NHS, whatever you want to call it. The problem is the way the command structure works is very complex, local versus central. So it's appealing. For us, we have 4 big cancer centres. They're not full because we've only just opened some of them. And as we've got capacity, why not do it not for profit for NHS patients to clear the backlog of cancer? It's just so difficult to talk. We've talked to literally hundreds of people within the NHS management to try and get things structured. The doctors say, fantastic, let's just do it. But it's not so easy. It's a difficult thing. There is something called a framework agreement that we have, and we are treating NHS patients, but we can do a real big scale, just like COVID. Let's do it for cancer. Let's really put the pressure on, clear the backlog, and then we'll be back to normal. That's the problem we've got. And, you know, it's the same for hips. It's the same for cataract operations. We can clear this backlog. Sitting back and saying we might be able to do it by 2024 or 2025 is hardly a positive way of handling the whole thing. We've got to do it now. And for cancer, we have no time. The patients have no time.
That's the thing, Carol. I love your ambition. I love how you want this to be a great national effort. But to me, it feels as if the NHS, as ever, is caught up in its bureaucracy and in its red tape.
Absolutely. We spend more time talking about equality and diversity than about getting the job done. The airlines don't do that. They want to sell you a seat. They don't care who sits in the seat. We should be the same. I don't care where someone with cancer comes from. They need treatment. We need to give it to them. Let's not spend away days discussing it. Let's just get on with the task in hand. And I'm afraid that's the problem in the system. And most of my colleagues of my age are disillusioned with it. The young guys come in full of bright ideas, and somehow they get welded down by the whole system. We've got to change it. We've got to do something different for the sake of future cancer patients.
I know, and there has to be a way, Carol, to better integrate these sorts of offers or sensible initiatives from the private sector, because the NHS is proving that it can't do it all.
You're right. The private sector can be very imaginative. We can't be so, the NHS can't be so imaginative. And that's the whole problem. We've got to change things.
No, I completely agree. So what would be your message, Carol, to government about your specific offer?
I think let's get a result. Let's get talking about it. We're not talking about it enough. We've been up to number 10, down through the whole food chain of management in the NHS. It's like a sponge. Lots of people, different levels. We've got to get to the decision makers and actually move forward. So the message is, let's just get on with it. People, months and months are going by and cancer is growing. We know the patients are out there. The NHS's own estimate is 34,000 people. There almost certainly are more cancer patients there that have not yet been diagnosed. They need treatment. Let's just get on with it.
Let's just get on with it. That is the perfect message to end with, Carol Sikora. And my message to anyone listening, any of those bureaucrats in NHS England, just take up this man's offer, cut the red tape. We're in a national cancer emergency. There isn't another moment to waste. Carol Sikora, keep up the great work. We'll speak to you again next week. It's coming up to 10 p.m. I'm Dan Wootton, and breaking tonight, Zelensky has defiantly told Putin that cities like Kiev, Mariupol and Kharkiv will never accept Russian occupation, and Ukraine will never bow to his ultimatums to achieve peace. It comes as the president's chief negotiator, Mikhailo Podolyak, claimed Ukrainian resilience is causing Russia to more adequately assess the situation of the war. We'll give you a first look at how tomorrow's newspapers are covering this ongoing crisis throughout the next hour. Is the government going to finally be more transparent about the COVID vaccine's sometimes deadly side effects and properly support its victims? The mainstream media might deliberately ignore the issue, but Tory MP Sir Christopher Chope is forcing Parliament to confront the pandemic's most taboo subject. He's here to discuss his vaccine damage bill in what is going to be a must-watch interview at 10:20. Our woke university's just completely out of control. Toby Young, founder and General Secretary of the Free Speech Union, weighs in as he leads the fight for freedom of expression on the UK's most PC campuses. Toby, uncancelled at 10:40. As the Met investigation into the disappearance of Madeleine McCann looks set to close after 11 years and £13 million in costs, were authorities justified in dedicating so much time and money to a single missing persons case? Also, is the trans swimmer Leah Thomas and her controversial success threatening the very existence of women's sport? I say yes, we'll debate it. Plus, as it's revealed, the new Briton series is light on its infamous intimate moments. Have the woke creators missed a trick by ditching its sex appeal? And Prince William has shown off his so-called beautiful rhythm. That's a local organiser's words, not mine, and please. But can the Cambridges shake off controversy over their trip? My superstar panel give their verdict, and all that and more in the Media Buzz tonight. I'm joined by Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, Benjamin Butterworth of the newspaper, and Esther Kraku too. And I'll crown a new greatest Briton in Union Jackass before the end of the show. But before all of that, let's catch up on the news headlines at 10 with Tamsin Roberts.
Dan, thank you. Good evening from the GB newsroom. The president of Ukraine says he needs to meet with President Vladimir Putin to determine Russia's position on ending the war. He also says it would not be possible to take a decision at such a meeting on what should be done with occupied territories. It would need to be put to a referendum. Meanwhile, new footage has emerged which appears to show Russian troops using stun grenades and gunfire to disperse a rally in Kherson. President Zelensky says civilians living in Ukraine face a constant struggle.
We hear it for hours, days, weeks. Our people hear it all the time, and immediately they take children, help the elderly, go to shelters, to basements, to save themselves, to survive from Russian missiles and bombs. With the sound of this siren, Ukrainians live, work, try to sleep, get treatment for wounds, give birth to children, die.
Meanwhile, Boris Johnson has stressed his horror at President Putin's use of increasingly brutal tactics, which include siege warfare and targeting civilians. During a meeting today, the leaders of the US, France, Germany and Italy agreed to increase pressure on Russia by maintaining wide-ranging sanctions. The Prime Minister also said their collective action has been effective in undermining Putin's war machine. MPs have backed a Labour motion condemning P&O Ferries' decision to sack 800 staff without notice and demanding their immediate reinstatement. The vote follows protests in London against the sudden sackings. The non-binding motion passed by 211 votes to 0. It called on the government to suspend the contracts and licences of DP World, the owner of P&O Ferries, and urgently bring forward legislation to outlaw fire and rehire. The Prime Minister has not yet been interviewed by police as detectives begin speaking to witnesses over lockdown-busting parties in Downing Street and Whitehall. Officers looking into the gatherings are now speaking to people. It's after over 100 people filed out a written questionnaire under caution, including Boris Johnson. As yet, no referrals have been made for the issuing of fixed penalty notices. A teenage girl has died after her e-scooter collided with a van this afternoon. The Metropolitan Police say officers were called to reports of a crash in Newham in East London. The girl, who police believe was 14, was treated by the London Ambulance Service but died of her injuries. The Met is investigating and has appealed for witnesses. Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe says she should have been freed 6 years ago. Speaking publicly for the first time since being released, the British Iranian questioned why it took 5 secretaries of state for her to be freed. Nazanin landed back in Britain last Thursday after the UK finally agreed to settle a £400 million debt dating back to the 1970s. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Dan Wootton tonight.
Tomorrow's news tonight now in our Media Buzz. So let's kick off the hour with the very first look at the newspaper front pages hot off the press. And the Metro leads on the escape from Mariupol. This is the terrifying story of the last 2 foreign journalists in the Ukrainian city who narrowly escaped death at the hands of Russian troops, hunting them for their reporting of Putin's war crimes. Thankfully, the paper reports both journalists were rescued by Ukrainian troops, but not before they had to dress up as doctors to avoid being caught by the Russians. This is an incredible story, actually. These 2 people, Mstislav Chernov, who's the photojournalist, and Evgeny Malitov. I'm pretty sure they've been working for the Associated Press, and I have so much respect for them. Obviously, the issue is now no one's there. So who on earth is going to be able to tell the terrible stories of the atrocities going on? The Eye reports Russian troops have turned on protesters in the occupied city of Kherson. Putin's forces have reportedly used gunfire against peaceful activists. Meanwhile, President Zelensky has insisted that any compromise with the Russian president must be put to the people in a referendum. I think that's not a bad idea if it's the compromise needed. Now, my superstar panel are back with me, Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, senior reporter at the Eye newspaper Benjamin Butterworth, and the social commentator Esther Kraku. And breaking tonight, the parents of missing Madeleine McCann will launch their own £1 million investigation into their daughter's disappearance following reports that the Met will wind down their official inquiry. Operation Grange was launched 4 years after Maddie tragically, 4 years ago, actually, after Maddie tragically disappeared from her family's Portuguese holiday apartment in 2007. But after spending some £13 million of taxpayer money trying to find out what happened to her, Met chiefs will reportedly end their fruitless probe within months. That's despite them having already submitted a claim for funding into the next financial year. They received almost £350,000 from the Home Office in their most annual recent windfall. Despite this blow, it was revealed today that Madeleine's tireless parents, Kate and Jerry McCann, will dip into their savings to hire their own private investigators in the event Operation Grange lays down its tools for good. A family source told the Daily Express Kate and Jerry will never give up. I mean, look, this is obviously a sensitive subject, given we all have strong feelings on Maddie. Esther Kraku, 11 years, £13 million in costs. Were authorities justified in spending so much time and money on a single missing person case?
Yeah, I think you're saying the right part out loud. That's the truth, really. Obviously, it's every parent's worst nightmare for their child to disappear. But if we put things into perspective, in the last year alone, I think it's 975 children have been abducted in the UK. Can you imagine them spending a fraction of that on each case? It's unjustifiable, it's unsustainable. You know, we live in a country that only has a finite amount of resources, and it sounds to me like their Madeleine McCann's parents are quite wealthy individually anyway. I just think, one, should there have been more, I suppose, financial participation on their part earlier, sooner? Should this have dragged on for as long as it should have? I don't think so, personally. I think we're very justified in saying enough is enough. I can't even believe it's gone on this long. And this is not to take away from the fact that it's a very sad situation. But I just think you fuel conspiracy theorists and even people saying that there's a slightly racist element to this by saying you're spending all of this money on this particular girl. Would you have spent this much money if it was, I don't know, a child from a different ethnic background that went missing? so to speak. And I think that, I'm not saying that's the case. I don't think necessarily that's the case. I just think this is clearly a misuse of public funds, especially after this long.
Carol Malone, is that a fair point from Esther, that actually Kate and Jerry have become independently wealthy, not because they want to give themselves a great life, but because they want to be able to pump money into finding Madeleine?
I don't think they are independently wealthy. They're doctors, the pair of them. But
I mean, with the money that's gone into the trusts.
Yeah, OK. But you know what I think, though. The police authority has slammed recently the inquiry, saying it's a ludicrous waste of money. And what they were saying, a spokesman for that authority said that it looked like Kate and Jerry McCann have been given preferential treatment, and I think it's true. Yeah. When you think 13 million spent on one investigation, normally when you have a missing child, the maximum that is spent is £2,500. So, and that's what the police actually put out on there. That's what it is. For the last few years now, I think if there was anything if Madeleine could be found, I think they would have found her by now. For years, the detectives involved in Operation Grange have been saying there are still critical lines of inquiry, we still have excellent lines of inquiry. Well, if they have, why haven't they produced anything? You cannot go on, and as Esther said, this does not take away from the heartbreak. Madeleine would be 19 now. She was 3 when she went missing. But this cannot go on forever. And if you were a parent of a missing child, as this inquiry has gone on, you would think, why wasn't my child worth this? It just doesn't seem fair to me. And yes, it's hard. You can't imagine living with what's happened to Kate and Jerry McCann. You can't imagine what they've gone through. But this could not go on forever.
Benjamin, I guess it's the media obsession with this case, because the police are constantly bounced into paying more attention into cases that get media attention. I'm not saying that's right, but we know that's how they operate.
I mean, it's quite an interesting point. I dare say you'd be better placed to answer it, because as someone that worked at the best-selling newspaper for all those years, you know that there are certain stories that the public really identify with. And I dare say it goes
Maddie has sold newspapers. I mean, it is an awkward thing to say, but Carol, you will acknowledge it too. A lot of newspaper editors have been very fascinated by this story.
What we also know, Dan, is, and let's not gloss over this, when the police have a missing child, or when they have someone they want to find, or if there is a murderer on the loose, say, the police ask for the help of the newspapers, and they ask you to keep the person in the public eye. They ask
and the parents did the same
every day, so that the interest will be kept alive in that case, and that's what's happened here.
And I think part of that is Esther's point. It's the fact that it was a middle-class family with a white girl who, looks like she could have been selling products, frankly. They look like the dream family. And I think that's probably why so many people identified with it in the first place.
But you think significant progress has been made in this case?
I do. And actually, that's why I think if there was a time to stop it, it was probably a long time ago. But look, you've got this guy, Christian Briton, who the German police, who work in a slightly different way to ours, have said they believe that he is behind it. They believe he knows the answers. And they went public on saying that because they hoped it would push it over the line of people speaking out. And so I think that it's very odd timing to stop funding it now, because there's a lot of evidence around him, and I think it's never looked more clear like they're on the cusp of the answer.
I think not true. The German prosecutor, a guy called Hans Christian Walters, he told Madeleine's parents that he has concrete evidence that would actually prove that this guy, Christian Bruckner, did it. But what he's saying is he will never release it because it's going to endanger, it would jeopardise his investigation into the guy, because the guy's a convicted paedophile. He's in prison right now, serving time for raping an elderly lady. But it
doesn't look like there's enough evidence.
So this guy, Christian...
But doesn't that prove that this is why the investigation should not stop now into Maddie's disappearance?
You know that every year, and you will know this, because every year, come the time when it's to renew the money, when more money has to be put out, we get told there's a new line, that there's an excellent
But this one we know is the case.
We've been told we don't know this is the case at all.
We do.
Okay, but how do you explain?
Yeah, but the German authorities have spoken out.
Then how do you explain to, let's say, and I'm just putting this out there, the sort of devil's advocate, how do you explain to a brown family if they're sort of I don't know, non-white ethnic background saying their child is missing, are you going to say, okay, actually, we're going to pledge £30 million to the search of your child until they're found? It's just a bad look.
I don't think this is about race or colour. I really don't.
I don't think it is either, but it's a hard sell.
I think the story did capture the imagination because I think a lot of people imagined that what happened to that family on holiday could happen to them. And I think everyone thought, thank God that isn't me. Thank God that isn't my child. Because it was a normal holiday situation and it shouldn't have happened. And I think that's why people can. And also because she was the most beautiful child.
Yeah, and it is a deeply tragic story. We all agree with that. Now, when Boris Johnson recently took a brisk jog on a beach at Blackpool, the woke mob, who love to celebrate body positivity and demand everyone be kind, were quick off the starting line with their cruel body-shaming comments. At first, the takes on the Prime Minister's exercise regime were light-hearted, with Twitter users matching the footage to appropriate soundtracks from TV and movie history. But soon the cruel comments came rolling in, with the man behind that Baywatch parody being forced to turn off replies from other Twitter users due to, quote, a lot of body shaming going on as the clip went viral. Now, chief among the trolls was Labour's most cretinous MP, and that's saying something, Chris Bryant, who tweeted, "Why can't Boris Johnson even run properly?" Now, luckily, the bullying didn't dampen the PM's enjoyment of his workout, which geared him up for his closing speech at the Conservative Spring Conference. He told the Blackpool Gazette that the Northern Hotspot speeches were absolutely beautiful and better than anything in the Caribbean. It's unclear how dehydrated he was. And finally, Prince William danced like nobody was watching, despite having the entire world's eyes on him as a future king during his latest royal tour with Kate Middleton. The Duke of Cambridge was praised for his, quote, beautiful rhythm as the royal couple danced with school children at a cultural centre in the Central American country of Belize. Local organiser Laura Caco said that witnessing the boogie was a pleasure, adding, "They were shaking their waists like nobody's business." The Cambridges also visited an ancient Mayan temple and learnt how to make chocolate on a cocoa farm, an experience hastily organised after villagers protested about issues relating to another planned stop, including the landing site of their helicopter. Carol Malone, Benjamin Butterworth, Esther Kraku, do stand by, because coming up is the trans swimmer Leah Thomas and her controversial success threatening the very existence of women's sport. My Superstar panel return to debate that. But next, is the government going to finally be more transparent about the COVID vaccine's sometimes deadly side effects and properly support its victims? Tory MP Sir Christopher Cho is here to discuss his vaccine damage bill straight after the break.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube. You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. Last week, a coroner concluded that tragic mother Kim Lockwood died from a catastrophic bleed on the brain caused by a rare side effect of the COVID-19 vaccine. Now, Ms. Lockwood, there she is, complained of an excruciating headache 8 days after her AstraZeneca jab in March 2021. And she was pronounced dead just 17 hours after being admitted to hospital. The COVID jab has done a lot of amazing work, saving lives and liberty, and the Department of Health stand by the fact that its benefits far outweigh any risks for most people. But Ms. Lockwood was young and healthy. And she's one of many cases of vaccine damage, an issue the vast bulk of the mainstream media refuse to even talk about. But Conservative MP Sir Christopher Shope wants the government to be more transparent about potential dangers and pass his vaccine damage bill, which would guarantee proper support and compensation for victims of serious COVID jab side effects. Now, this was his impassioned speech during a parliamentary debate for the bill earlier this month that went viral.
The scale of this vaccine nightmare is now such that the number of vaccine damage cases exceeds all cases arising from previous vaccine programmes. As at the 15th of December last year, the Medicine and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency had received and analysed a total of 410,232 yellow card reports. Some patients were reported to have died shortly after vaccination. 666 in the case of Pfizer reports, 1,164 in the AstraZeneca reports, and 23 in the Moderna reports.
And I'm delighted to say Christopher Hope is here tonight. Now, the first thing to say, Christopher, is it's interesting that no one else in the media wants to talk about vaccine damage. I presume you haven't been asked to appear on BBC News or Sky News or ITV News about this?
Absolutely not, no. And indeed, in the debate, a fortnight ago, my German debate, some people wanted to put that up on YouTube, and YouTube have taken it down. Although the minister said that the questions I was asking were really pertinent ones, and she didn't disagree with any of the facts which I set out.
So there's a vast amount of censorship about vaccine damage. We know that, because what you've just said proves that. I guess some people would say that's because we've been involved in almost a war-like campaign to get people jabbed. But it's not right to cover up the side effects, is it?
No, it isn't. And indeed, it's counterproductive, because vaccine confidence is built by saying to people, your chances of the vaccine going wrong for you are minuscule. But if it does go wrong for you and you suffer severe loss or even death, then we, the state, will look after you because you've done the right thing. And that was the message that was delivered in the 1979 vaccine damage payments legislation. And it was, in a sense, repeated by the government when they adopted that payment scheme to apply to the COVID vaccines. But as of today, not a single payout has been made, and they've only just started processing claims. And all the questions I ask, there seem to be tremendous resistance from the government to recognise that there will be the need to compensate people who have done the right thing but have suffered as a result.
I guess a lot of folk would say that nothing will compensate the family of Kim Lockwood.
Right.
You know, a young mum, perfectly healthy, died as a result of the vaccine. What should her family be entitled to, in your view?
Well, in my view, the minimum under the Damage Payments Act should be £120,000 uprated for inflation, and that hasn't been done since 2007, which would make it about £175,000. That's a drop in the ocean, frankly, but that is nevertheless what should be being paid out without the need to prove fault or liability. But some of these cases, particularly, I mean, it's a sad thing, but for the consequences for the loved ones of somebody who's died or who've been severely injured are, in any normal damages situation, they'd be paid out millions rather than tens or hundreds of thousands of pounds. So there's a big issue here for the government because the government decided that they would indemnify the manufacturers because the manufacturers didn't want to take that risk because the vaccines hadn't been tested to the extent that most vaccines are. But the government took on that risk, but now it needs to face up to the consequences and recognise that there are people, a minority of people, but nevertheless a significant minority of people who have suffered as a result. The government was in denial. They were saying that these vaccines were absolutely safe, but more recently the message has changed to being that they are safe for the majority. And my question is, well, what about those who are not in the majority? What's being done to help them?
We need that honesty, don't we? Because already last week we're seeing Sajid Javid talking about a second booster, a fourth jab potentially being rolled out to the entire population. Now, that's when I start to think this doesn't make sense. I was prepared to be double jabbed, maybe even prepared to have a booster as part of a great national effort, at some risk to myself as a relatively young man, in order to get the chains off, to unshackle the country after 2 years of horrendous lockdowns, which I don't think ever should have been in place, but that's a whole other story. But a second jab? A second booster, a fourth jab, where there's no evidence that for someone like me who's recovered from COVID now twice, that's going to do any good. Are you worried that the government's just getting itself in deeper trouble here when it comes to vaccine damage?
I think so, because not only on the damage front, but also on the effectiveness front. Because a lot of people who've had the first booster, so-called, have actually suffered from COVID. And so
I did.
so the idea that this is effective is actually for the fairies. It may help reduce the impact, but it certainly doesn't prevent it. But now we're going right down the age range, and we know that the consequences of getting COVID for somebody of my age is much more severe potentially than it is for somebody of your age, and particularly when we talk about children. Now, the balance of advantage and disadvantage is completely different for youngsters. Why are we putting all the pressure on getting those people vaccinated when actually, if there is any benefit, it's probably going to be to the benefit of the older population, not for them?
Of course, but the vaccine damage, which is obviously what your bill is about, is going to be much more acute in the younger age groups, because if you look at the evidence regarding myocarditis, for example, the heart condition, it disproportionately impacts young men, sort of 25 years and under. So that's why when you've got Sajid Javid potentially talking about a rollout to the entire population, I just start to think they've lost the plot a bit, because even the head of the JCVI, the chairman of the JCVI, is saying, let's stop a nationwide rollout and start focusing on the vulnerable, which makes much more sense.
Exactly. No, that's absolutely right. And I don't think that the Secretary of State and his team have got to come to terms with what's actually happening out there. And a colleague and I went and had a meeting with the Secretary of State last week on this subject. And frankly, it was a big disappointment, because
What happened?
Well, we had 10 minutes and he said that he would look into this issue, that he would try and ensure that the questions I asked in my German debate received answers. Well, I should have had those answers already by now, but I haven't. And he was full of platitudes, frankly, about how the most people had benefited from the vaccine. That's not in dispute. But actually, what we need to do is ensure that the people who haven't benefited from the vaccine, that they're looked after by the state, because they did the right thing by the state, and the state now needs to reciprocate.
Do you have any idea of numbers yet?
Well, we know that people, more than 1,000 people have applied for vaccine damage. We know that on the figures that at least 2,000 people have died shortly after receiving the vaccine. That's from the yellow cards. We know that upwards of 500,000 yellow cards have been issued. So when we talk about probably tens of thousands of people who have suffered severe damage as a result of this, I think that's the sort of ballpark figure we're in. And because I've been quite high profile on this, I've been recipient of a lot of these cases. But the question I asked to the Secretary of State is, if coroner's courts have reported that somebody has died as a direct result of the COVID vaccine, why are we hanging around waiting before we pay out to their loved ones who've been left behind? What else needs to be proved? And the coroner's inquest doesn't reach a conclusion except on the strongest of medical evidence. And you refer to one coroner's report. There was another one last Friday, I think, in Winchester. And there have been a whole series of cases. And a lot of these people have been in the prime of life, married with young children, breadwinners, and with all the consequences that flow from that. And the number of people in that age group who actually died from COVID-19 is relatively small. So it's even more disastrous that there's a high proportion of people in that age group who are dying as a result of the vaccine.
So Christopher Chope, please do keep me posted on this. It's a very important one, and we know the rest of the media are ignoring it, but we won't here on GB News. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Coming up in Uncancelled, are woke universities out of control? Toby Young, founder and General Secretary of the Free Speech Union, weighs in at 10:40. The next in the media buzz is the success of controversial trans swimmer Leah Thomas a threat to the existence of women's sport? We dive into the latest battle in the culture wars straight after the break.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. Let's return to tomorrow's news tonight in our Media Buzz. More front pages are in, and the Daily Star lead with the news that the legendary Sky Sports Soccer Saturday reporter Chris Kamara, an amazing guy, actually, loved this man, has quit live TV after revealing a few days ago that he struggles with a speech disorder. In a tweet over the weekend, Cammy confirmed that he suffers from the apraxia speech disorder after fans noticed him struggle while reporting on a Rotherham United game. And thanking his fans today, Kamara announced his pause from TV but vowed it wasn't the end of him on our screens yet. And I hope not. Cammy's a great guy, so I hope he's doing OK. Putin's super yacht faces seizure. That's the Daily Telegraph splash. Italy, although this is the Times that we're looking at, so let me just get the Times here. That's Putin threatening civilians to break Mariupol's spirit. Russia escalated its assault on Mariupol last night, threatening civilians as it sought to break Ukrainian resistance. What do we have next? The Sun, which leads with an alleged plot to kill Government Minister Michael Gove. This is just utterly horrendous. The newspaper writes that the jihadi fanatic who murdered Sir David Amess last year at a constituency surgery had staked out the Levelling Up minister's home 6 times while visiting Parliament twice, but was put off an attack because of the armed police presence, so thank God for that. Also on the front page, Kate the Jungle VIP, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, are on their royal tour in the Caribbean, where snaps of them have been captivating the nation, unless you're a Republican, of course. The Independent leads with Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe condemning the UK government over its delayed response, saying I should have been back 6 years ago. Speaking for the first time since her dramatic return to the UK last week, the British Iranian said she lost trust in the government after a string of foreign secretaries failed to get her out of prison. Front page of the Daily Mail. Twisted terrorist Ali Harbi Ali spent years plotting to kill MPs, including Michael Gove. A court heard today. The Daily Express tells the Chancellor it's time to raise state pensions, Mr Sunak. This is in a bid to combat the growing cost of living crisis. More on the Media Buzz now with tonight's superstar panel, the Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, the iNewspaper's Benjamin Butterworth and social commentator Esther Kraku. Now, woke ideology has put the future of women's sport under threat after American college swimmer Leah Thomas became the first transgender woman to win a national championship. After living for 20 years as a man, Thomas has obvious physical advantages from going through male puberty, such as greater upper body strength and muscle mass, it goes without saying. And by benefiting from these unfair advantages, she has gone from the wilderness of men swimming with a ranking outside the NCAA top 500 to competing as a trans woman and beating Emma Wayan, an Olympic medal winner. I put this ludicrous situation to Caitlyn Jenner, the world's most famous trans woman who won an Olympic gold medal while competing as Bruce, and she was adamant that biological men and women should compete separately.
I am firmly behind protecting women's sports. We cannot have biological boys competing against women in women's sports. It's bad for a couple of reasons. One, it's bad for the trans community. To be honest with you, this is terrible publicity for the trans community. Like, we're taking advantage of women, okay? And it's bad, obviously, for women's sports. We need a fair playing field. And right now, if we allow this, it's not a fair playing field.
Now, I should add that I don't blame Leah Thomas personally for using the rules to her advantage. Instead, I blame the sporting authorities for implementing a shamefully lax policy. As I said in a new column for the Mail Online today, with the International Olympic Committee refusing to adopt a hardline policy on trans athletes, there needs to be a popular uprising before we risk female athletes becoming forever marginalised and women's sport morphing into competition for subpar biological males. Even though she's not breaking any rules, Leah Thomas is already taking us down that slippery slope. Benjamin Butterworth, I put it to you that it's woke people like you who are actually causing women's sport to now become endangered, and it is shameful.
Well, I mean, I think that's a deeply unpleasant suggestion and not very fair. I mean, look, you
but it's true.
You call the people that support transgender people in your column for Mail Online politically correct monsters. I mean, that is the kind of language that is causing real harm.
Not
trans people
who support transgender people, Benjamin Butterworth. That's
what you're
Do
saying.
not misquote me. People who support Leah Thomas taking the places of biologically female swimmers. That is very different than not supporting trans people in day-to-day life. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm afraid these debates lead to very real hatred and judgment of people that, have no interest in being an athlete and are just trying to lead their lives and were born in a slightly different way to the vast majority of us. Now, what I'd say when it comes to the trans question is that a male to female, so a trans woman like Leah, there is obviously, as it's the case with this, there is a certain physical advantage, and that's indisputable. But also, you talk about blanket rules for trans people. Well, someone that's gone the other way is probably going to have an innate disadvantage in most cases. So let's not, you say
yes,
trans.
you never see it. That's why you never see it. It's not an issue.
What I think is the answer is that people should be judged on their individual basis, on their height and their physical mass and ability. And then I think that is a much fairer way to do it, because there will be plenty of trans people, trans women, for whom they don't necessarily have a big advantage at all.
But, Dan talked about before about the authorities. It absolutely is. The sporting authorities could stop this at an instant. The International Olympic Committee, they said, they were the one that tinkered with the rules originally, and they said that the trans women could compete. But what they said was they could compete if they had something called suppressed testosterone
Which was
treatment.
their first mistake.
No, hang on. So they said that was a rule, but then they relaxed on that. So now competitors don't have to have this suppressed testosterone treatment. And it's just, and I wonder, you say it's not Leah's fault. I kind of think this, why would someone who, as a man, she was 554th in the world, so not very good, frankly, in the scheme of things. She suddenly goes...
better than I would have done.
She goes from that to suddenly number one, and I wonder what joy there is in winning, what sense of achievement there is, that she's only winning because she suddenly said, I'm now living as a woman.
But hang on, she didn't transition just to win a medal.
Did she not? Do you know that for a fact?
I would say that for a fact.
Well, she's done one year of hormone treatment, Esther. 1 year. And the fact is, 1 year of hormone treatment does not undo male puberty. And there's actually nothing that can undo that.
I feel this actually really works me up that we keep having this conversation. Our language has been policed so much to the extent that we cannot say that Leah Thomas has all the advantages of a biological male, which this person does because biologically, Leah Thomas is a male.
Was born a male.
I don't even want to get into the politics of the language.
But as defined, and be scientific, as defined
pronouns. I don't want to get into the
by
politics
the XY chromosome.
I think she still has male genitals.
Yes. XY chromosomes. Don't even say male and female sports. Just say XX sports and XY sports.
Exactly.
And the reason why I'm even willing to take it to this basic level is because the fact that there is even debate around this, the fact that the Olympic Committee is saying, oh, but you must take these hormones, but then they ban drugs. They ban drugs for weightlifting and all these things. And I'm just thinking, what is the difference?
No,
if you're going to ban athletes for taking certain drugs, but you're happy for these athletes that are clearly have different biological makeup from the categories they want to compete in, to inject their bodies full of all these hormones, what is the difference? And let everyone use steroids and everything and just let them get on with it.
But
There's no difference.
The good thing now is I think women are fighting back now.
Yes, they
I think women aren't going to have this. They have it. Women have, they're fighting an uphill battle all the time, against rape, abuse, against male violence, and now they have this to contend with as well. But, I've read stories of late, women are refusing to use toilets with transgender women.
Single
They're refusing to go into change rooms.
To say.
No, I'm sorry. Why is it horrible?
Tell me, how do you
it is not a safe space.
Tell me,
women are claiming back safe spaces.
How do you know?
Rightly.
How do you know?
Well, Benjamin Butterworth,
women in the
Butterworth, the Daily Mail has actually interviewed Leah Thomas's teammates on the swimming team. And Leah Thomas, who, by the way, I'm told has gone through 2.5 years of hormone treatment. But they feel deeply uncomfortable now in their changing room because Leah Thomas retains male genitalia and remains attracted to women. And the teammates say that their safety has been shrugged off because of the woke mob. And to me, it's insanity. I know a lot about women's sport, actually. I'm a huge supporter of women's sport. I'm one of the official supporters of the London Pulse netball team, go London Pulse. And you know what, Benjamin? You wouldn't know about anything that female athletes go through. Do you know how difficult it is as a female athlete when you have to factor in your menstrual cycle every month to competing? You would have no idea. And Leah Thomas doesn't need to worry about that. So before you start trying to degrade female athletes, why don't you actually think about what they have to go through and just for one damn moment put your ridiculous woke ideology to one side?
I mean, what a load of sort of cliched nonsense. Look, you talk about who she's attracted to. Look, I mean, you could, by that...
That's not what he was talking about.
It is. It is.
Menstrual cycle.
Hang on, let me speak.
How do you explain?
Hang on, let me
Well, address
reply.
what you just said.
Let me reply. You said her peers are upset because she's still attracted to women. Well, by that argument, you wouldn't be having any lesbian sportswomen, would you?
But that's not the point.
No, that's not what they're saying.
You've taken a very niche argument there.
Carol said women are fighting back against transgender women using their toilets. Well, how do you spot a transgender woman, Carol?
With all due respect, lesbians are not walking around with their schlongs hanging out
but you said
in the changing room.
It was your
seriously.
comment.
Oh, lesbians
I said I'd read those stories elsewhere. I don't know how they identified
Carol,
it.
how many lesbians do you know that walk around changing rooms
nonsense.
with their penises hanging out?
Well, exactly, not many.
Look, I said at the start...
Okay, final word, Benjamin.
That I think it should be more nuanced than whether they're trans or not. And there may be people, Leah Thomas may be an example where it's not appropriate. Okay. But this fuels...
I'm glad you've agreed. We're in agreement. Benjamin Butterworth, Carol Malone, Esther Kraku. Thank you. But bare bums and alfresco romps graced the first season of Netflix smash Bridgerton. Calm down, Benjamin. But the Regency hit has gone limp for its much-awaited return. Fans of the steamy period drama will be left unsatisfied at reports that woke bosses of Series 2, which hit screens from Friday, have axed saucy sex scenes. Actor Jonathan Bailey, who plays the hunky Anthony Bridgerton, has a new romance with the beautiful Kate Sharma, played by Simone Ashley. But despite the pair's flirtatious on-screen chemistry, their lust never gets out of first gear. Insiders have seen the new episodes, have claimed to The Sun that it never progresses beyond flirtation and they nearly kiss. By comparison, viewers were treated to Anthony making love with a former love interest played by Sabrina Bartlett within 3 minutes of the first series up against a tree. If Netflix aren't careful, I can imagine viewers going to fire up an episode before declaring, not tonight, I have a headache. But who knows, maybe it gets spicier later in the season. Now, coming up, the crowning moment of the show as I coronate today's greatest Briton and Union Jackass. But next, are woke universities out of control? Toby Young, founder and general secretary of the Free Speech Union, joins me in mere seconds. But first, a quick look at what's coming up in tomorrow's show. Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, why were the mainstream media hell-bent on pushing COVID hysteria and ignoring the costs of lockdown? Former ITV and Sky News director Mark Sharman pulls back the curtain as my lockdown inquiry continues. Plus, GB News star Darren Grimes and political firebrand Anne Widdecombe tackle the issues that matter to you, and I'll break down the headlines of the day with my superstar panel. The former Daily Star editor and current columnist Dawn Neeson, the conservative commentator Calvin Robinson, and the author and journalist Rebecca Reed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. But now it's time for Uncancelled. And this is where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. More proof this weekend that our woke universities are spiralling out of control. Oxford University's Worcester College has been slammed for discrimination after it cancelled a Christian concert event in response to ill-founded complaints. The college, led by David Isaac, bowed to its snowflake students, who claimed they felt distressed by the event, despite an independent review finding that allegations of aggressive LGBT conversion therapy leafleting by attendees were totally unfounded. This comes after the shameful decision by the University of Nottingham to withdraw an honorary degree for the Commission on Race and Ethnic Disparities chairman Dr Tony Sewell, because his evidence conclusion that the UK was not institutionally racist did not toe the line the left wanted to promote. The university said it would be inappropriate to award the degree while Dr Sewell was, quote, at the centre of a political controversy, but human rights watchdogs have been urged to investigate the decision. While General Secretary of the Free Speech Union, Toby Young, is leading the challenge against both the university decisions, he joins me now. And Toby, I mean, this is evidence of this woke wave destroying our universities, right?
Yes, it is. I was quite surprised by the apology that David Isaac, the provost of Worcester, issued when some student activists campaigned about the fact that a Christian group had booked some of the facilities in the college last summer. The complaints were seemingly completely unfounded. Christian Concern, the group in question, commissioned an independent inquiry led by a charity lawyer to find out if any of the allegations that were made against Christian Concern and the Wilberforce Academy, which was the educational program they booked into Worcester College, if they'd done any of the things that they were accused of, such as aggressively leafleting students and others at the college. And the person leading the inquiry found no evidence at all. And yet, on the basis of student allegations, David Isaac, the provost of the college, apologized to the students for having booked or allowed this Christian group to use the college facilities, and vowed that he would never rent the college facilities to this particular group again. Pretty shocking. So the Free Speech Union has written to David Isaac, and who's incidentally a former chair of Stonewall, and asked him to apologise to Christian Concern and to say to them that he's perfectly happy for them to book the college facilities again this summer for their Wilberforce Academy.
Good on you. The Tony Sewell situation, Toby, just blows my mind, because that university has awarded honorary degrees to loads more far more controversial figures than Tony Sewell. I mean, what did Tony Sewell do apart from say that Britain isn't a racist country?
You're not wrong there, Dan. I mean,
racist country.
That's right. We looked at the honorary degrees that have been awarded by Nottingham down the years, and they include two former Labour Prime Ministers, Ed Balls. They include
from the right party.
The former Prime Minister of Malaysia, who's currently serving time for fraud, a former Chinese ambassador to the UK, who said that the story about human rights abuses in China was fake news. Quite extraordinary. And yet somehow Tony Sewell, because he dared to conclude that Britain wasn't institutionally racist, he's too controversial a figure to award an honorary degree to. So what the Free Speech Union has done is we've complained not only to the Vice-Chancellor of Nottingham, but we also lodged a complaint with the Equality and Human Rights Commission, in which we've accused Nottingham of racial discrimination and asked the Equality and Human Rights Commission, the human rights watchdog, to investigate Nottingham. We're not saying it was a straightforward example of racial discrimination. Why we think they've discriminated against Tony Sewell, Dr. Sewell, he has a doctorate from Nottingham, incidentally. Why we think they've discriminated against him is that they expected him as a black man, as a black intellectual, to have a correct progressive view about racism in Britain. And because he didn't come to the conclusion they expected him to come to as a black man, they decided to withdraw their offer of an honorary degree. And we see this kind of policing of minorities all over the place. Minority ethnic people who don't hold the correct progressive opinions about racism are penalised, are castigated as Uncle Tom figures, and are punished in a way that white people who say that Britain is institutionally racist aren't punished. So we think there's a real case here that the Equality and Human Rights Commission should investigate.
Absolutely. Keep up the great work, Toby Young. Keep those woke universities honest. It's a pleasure to have you on Uncancelled tonight. We'll speak again very soon. But it's time now to reveal today's Greatest Briton and Union Jackass. My superstar panel back with me. Carol Malone, who's your nominee for Greatest Briton?
OK, mine is Kate, Duchess of Cambridge. You know, we saw them earlier in Belize. We saw everyone was talking about how Wills was dancing. But the pictures today of Kate, she never puts a foot wrong with this woman, you know. She was dancing and playing and singing with, you know, with all the people that they visited. The woman is she is the crown jewel in the royal family. I don't think it would survive without her. She's the real star of the royal family now.
Great nomination. Benjamin Butterworth, who's your nominee?
My greatest Briton is George Montagu, who successfully led the campaign to have gross indecency laws removed from the statute book and to apologise and pardon all the people convicted, including himself. And he died on Friday with his partner, his husband of 25 years, in his arms. And he left the most incredible legacy for so many gay men in this country that wrongly were persecuted because of who they were born to be.
Great work. Love that. Esther Kraku, what about you?
My greatest Briton is Eugene Favier, who is the captain of the Pride of Hull, which is a P&O ferry. And if you've been paying attention this week, you know that P&O, in the most ridiculous, unceremonious, horrible manner, decided to get rid of hundreds of employees on the spot, telling them that they lost their jobs and replacing them with cheaper agency workers. Anyway, Eugene blocked his ferry from being onboarded by policemen who wanted to forcefully remove these employees that were so ungraciously, unceremoniously fired. So he's definitely the greatest.
All great nominees, but I'm going to go with Carol Malone for Kate, our future queen. Jackass time now. Carol Malone, who's your Union Jackass nominee?
I'm with P&O here. This is my Jackass is a guy called Peter Hebblethwaite. He's the millionaire boss of P&O Ferries, who, as Esther just said, fired 800 people last week. You know, there was a story about him. There he is. He's just sacked people, dropped the bottom out of their world.
Okay.
He's living, won't bother him though, because he's living in a 1.5 million 5-bed farmhouse.
So he's fine.
Swimming pool, stable.
Benjamin Butterworth.
6'8" here.
A guy called Christian Benedict, a fool you've not heard of before. He runs campaigns for Amnesty UK and put up a sign saying Apartheid Avenue outside the Israeli embassy. On the same street, the Russian embassy. Amnesty UK has got its priorities all wrong.
Esther Kraku, your nominee for Union Jackass.
Sadiq Khan. A friend of mine just sent me a picture of the ban on staring on our London transport system. That's still up. TfL has now banned staring of a sexual nature, led by this great mayor of London.
Who's policing
I threw up
that,
a little
then?
bit in my mouth just saying that.
Who's policing that?
He is
How do
a
you police
failed
that?
mayor of
That's the
London.
more
He is
important
the
question.
failed mayor of London, and he is the Union Jackass tonight.
Hooray.
Esther Kraku, great nomination. Superstar panel Monday night. Thank you very much. It's always feisty. Carol Malone, Benjamin Butterworth, and Esther Kraku. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm, of course, back tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Headliners is next, though. Good night.
Hello and welcome to the latest. I'm Aidan McGivern. Variable amounts of cloud will drift across the UK during the next 24 hours, giving the odd shower, but for most it's staying dry and fine. We're on the edge of an area of high pressure which is dominating things to the east of the UK, keeping weather systems at bay from the Atlantic. A southerly airflow will mean that areas of generally medium or high cloud will drift north from the continent, and they could bring the odd shower to southern England, South Wales during Monday night and into the start of Tuesday. But for the vast majority, it's simply a dry night, clear spells, and where we get prolonged clear spells in sheltered spots, there'll be a touch of frost as we start off Tuesday. The lowest temperature, perhaps the north, the northwest of Scotland, -3 Celsius possible here. However, despite the cold start in places, it's looking like a sunny morning on Tuesday, and any medium cloud that drifts north, bringing with it some showers, will tend to fade away by the afternoon. Just the odd shower there for southern Scotland and northern England. Otherwise, under the sunshine, 15 to 18 Celsius widely up and down the country, 19 or 20 degrees possible in London or Cambridge. Cloud cover generally fizzles out on Tuesday night into the start of Wednesday, and with widespread clear skies, Wednesday morning starts off again with a chill in the air, a touch of frost in places away from urban centres, but a bright start. There'll be the odd fog patch for parts of eastern Scotland into northeast England, but for the vast majority, Wednesday morning is simply looking sunny, and that's how it stays throughout the day. A shower or two could bubble up across East Anglia and the southeast as temperatures rise to 17 or 18 Celsius. But for the vast majority, Wednesday's looking sunny, so is Thursday, so is Friday, but with a bit more cloud in the far northwest.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your